Please, can we have a round of applause for the next storyteller, Kristina?
Hi everyone. Can everybody hear me? No? Okay, how about now? No? Better? Okay. So, if anyone would like to talk to me or get in touch with me after this, my name is Kristina, spelled with a K, if you want to look me up on Facebook. Now, my story is not going to be particularly joyful, but as a wise man said once, we never think about it, but truth may turn out to be sad. Okay. In the words of the disabled Russian writer, Ruben Gallego, I am a hero. It's easy to be a hero. If you don't have hands or feet, you are either a hero or dead. I was born in a provincial town in Russia in 1982. At the age of 2, I was diagnosed with a severe, life-threatening form of juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. My joints swelled painfully and eventually became immobile. Within the next few years, I lost the ability to walk, which, in the absence of proper wheelchairs, meant confinement to a children's stroller. The Soviet doctor gave me a few years at most, meaning I'd die at the age of 10. Thus began my social death, and it would last for a very long time. As my condition was considered too rare by the state and too unseemly by the normals, I was quickly abandoned by most of my relatives, neighbors, and the government. Abandonment is a scandal only when it is the living that you leave behind. The dead do not count. The dead are hungry and they're trying to understand why there is so much suffering, but they do not count. My country happens to be exceptionally brutal for anyone with a serious disability. Let me be more specific. My mom and I lived on the 5th floor of a building with no elevator, and I had to be homeschooled since no academic institution tolerated a disabled student in its midst. My mom was a single parent working full-time, my grandmother looking after me during the day. When I was 16 years old, I got extremely ill and was eventually admitted into the ICU. Since my mom was a doctor, she made sure that I was seen by the best specialists during that hospitalization. As I found out much later, the head of the hospital I was in casually suggested to my mom that she discontinue my treatment. Her advice was to let me die, not for any particular medical reasons, but because the disabled had no future where I lived, and letting me die seemed more humane to her. I was a bright, pretty, vivacious girl who enjoyed reading Nietzsche and Sartre. I wanted to become a journalist or a writer, yet the director of the hospital my mom was talking to didn't waste any time informing her that I was better off dead. My mom's answer was, if I die, she dies. It was around then that she decided to do the impossible. She resolved to bring her disabled daughter from a small Russian town to the United States. There I would finally receive the education I deserved. Against nearly impossible odds, we did find a way to emigrate here. After years of trying, I remember the night we were leaving Russia. We were traveling late at night, an unusually savage storm raging around us. I couldn't help feeling like the country itself became a malicious entity that was refusing to let us go, splitting into thousands black ribbons and snakes to trap us forever. However, in 2000, we finally arrived in America, escaping the state and culture that threatened both of us with physical, social, and intellectual death. While I didn't find the mythical acceptance I was hoping for, a few years later, I got accepted into a doctorate philosophy program at DePaul University. I always made a point to cultivate a rich and expansive mental palette to discuss my experiences, and this academic platform gave me ample new resources. I wrote my dissertation over one summer in excruciating pain. I worked on the question of evil and suffering, of moral agency and indifference, in an attempt to understand how the world could meet my dark gaze and remain exactly the same as it was. My dissertation defense was a success. Having made few friends and a lot of foes in the program, the conference where the defense was held was packed. I wasn't liked, but I was respected, and that's just fine. I became a doctor of philosophy, possibly one of the first disabled Russian women to ever earn this title. I was exiled from my own country, where I was being killed by oblivion, abandonment, and imprisonment in my tiny apartment, where children on the street pointed their fingers at me and shouted insults. The bright, wide-eyed disabled girl did not exist because she was unthinkable. I was unthinkable in my defiance, my intellect, and, the worst sin of all, my sensuality. My life was forever decided by the many flights of stairs I had no way of climbing, the elevators neglected to be built, and the ramps leading to nowhere. I was held prisoner by the architecture. I was immobilized, the Walk of Atonement in reverse. But what about the United States? I am grateful for simply being a disabled woman in an accessible environment, often lonely, but free to move as I wish. I am not so sure about acceptance, though. Here, people with disabilities will tell you that disability is a source of pride and a form of biological diversity. They will tell you that we are independent, that we do not need any help or charity, that we're basically like everyone else. After all, everyone's vulnerable, which is to say, subject to aging and eventual death. They just don't really know about it yet. But I do not have the luxury of celebrating my alleged independence, because my famous different abilities are limited to typing, and even that is getting increasingly more painful. I speak as a victim, and I guard my resentments against anyone who tells me just how self-sufficient I am. I am warped and backwards in my thinking because I decline to join the chorus of the future, wherein every person with disabilities is proud of their bodily differences, wherein the language of charity is met with scorn, and wherein brute suffering is turned into an unfortunate byproduct of human variation. If future is truly a value category, then I have chosen to distance myself from the bright world of tomorrow. I am the density of the past, and I resent the future, where every withered limb is a triumph of biodiversity. A few weeks ago, I was saying my vows before the small fraction of the world that chose to love me, wearing a delicate dust rose dress, a bouquet of lilies in my small hands, surrounded by friends and family. It was my wedding day, and my mom's happiness jolted my heart. I was feeling loved, and I was looking back at my life, oscillating between the country that couldn't think disability at all and the country that could think disability, just not mine. I come from the country where it's easy to be a hero, and I suddenly realized that most of my life I had made every effort to be extraordinary. I had fought for and won over 2 decades that I wasn't supposed to have. I died and came back from the dead. I got my PhD in philosophy, and I survived the irremediable. I've achieved a lot of what I could, and a little bit of what I couldn't. But now I want to be something else. I want my husband to know that I can feel tenderly. I want to be the one who makes my loved ones laugh. I want to put fragile heaps of pale blue flowers where the barrenness of survival once was. Which is to say, I no longer want to be extraordinary. A cipher of the savage and the deformed, the beggar queen in exile, I want to be something more impossible. I've had a long journey, and now I want to be the magic for the man I love, crimson and clover.